Before we get to your scheduled video, please remember that likes and comments tell YouTube to promote our work to other people, and subscribing to the channel tells you when something new drops. You can also head to the link tree in the description to peruse my books, join us on Discord, or support us on Patreon. You can get episodes of Journey of Wrestling and Violent Profiles early, as well as a load of other treats. Even just $1 a month earns you a name drop for being cool. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show. Greetings and salutations, fellow 20th level druids. It is I, Eric J. Chucky, joined as always by the boy.
Hey.
This is the Two Nerds Podcast, and today we are talking about the film Nimona, which you can watch on Netflix, and you probably already have. Let's talk first about who is cool. That would include Passion Killer 711, Harmony, Rob, Destrucity KTL, and a guy from Ohio. A guy from Ohio is taking advantage of our higher tier of being cool. It is $15 a month. Thank you. You pay that amount and you can tell us what to podcast on. And God, if that ever fills up, I don't know how we're going to regulate that, but we'll do it live, I guess.
We'll figure it out.
Right now, a guy from Ohio is the king of telling us what to podcast on.
If we get a bunch of people, we might start doing polls.
We might start doing polls if we get a lot of people in general. What we'll probably do is just have slots. Not to mention better shit in your shit, but Linkara does that, and he just basically stays filled up all year, and if someone drops out, that's how you get a thing.
There you go.
So, but, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We were asked to watch Nimona, and let's give a spoiler-free review before we get into something that I want to talk about, and you agreed was kind of a good idea. I thought Nimona was really fun, if flawed. I would watch it again.
I had fun watching this movie. I think it was a good fairy tale. And I would absolutely watch it again. It was a good time.
Yeah, and I think the messages it conveyed were good.
Yeah.
I agree with them, and I thought they were mostly done pretty well.
So now, let's talk about the thing you had mentioned talking about to try and frame the podcast that is to come. Because we don't like to come across overly negative on this podcast. Especially for something we liked and enjoyed like this. But there are some flaws, and you felt it was good to frame it in a specific way.
Well, I get this question a lot, both in my personal life and like when people are commenting on the videos. And we do appreciate those comments. Please continue to do so. I would rather engage with you guys, but I might as well talk about it in a forum here. Why so nitpicky? Why don't you just turn off your brain and enjoy the ride?
So there's two answers to that for me. The first is that, especially if I know I'm going to make a podcast or some sort of content on something, if I don't have anything to say, it just becomes, well, we make a meme of it, the Guardians of the Galaxy podcast. It just becomes me repeating all the lines I liked and talking about all the cool, did an explosion, and that's bad content. That's reason two. The first most important reason is I would love to. If it's the kind of movie, and I can usually gauge this real quick when I'm watching a thing, if it's the kind of movie or TV show where you're supposed to turn your brain off and just take the ride, brother, I would absolutely love to. That's what I want to do. You have to be on my side in that movie. Like, we've got to meet in the middle. You've got to give me enough that I can just engage with the narrative and let the rest flow by the wayside.
I would basically agree with everything you've said. And to provide an example of the closest I've been to being able to turn off my brain during a movie in spite of its flaws, the bar is just so fucking high, is the problem. And that was the Super Mario Brothers movie. Because the movie is flawed.
Certainly, yeah.
But, like, who gives a shit? It was fun.
And that's where I wanted this movie to end up. Because I could tell real rapidly after the little short film at the beginning what kind of movie this was. And I wanted to take the ride with the movie. And I just couldn't get there. So my brain was just like you when you were watching Dread.
Right.
If you go back to an earlier podcast of ours, I was fully on the ride. Like, I was just engaged with the narrative. I didn't see any of the various, any of the issues. You weren't, so shit just kept cropping up, and it kept bothering you. That's this movie for me.
To your first point, I also like to think critically about films, not just because of the podcast, but you and I have been talking for, a couple of years before the podcast started, I think, one or two. And
we've known each other since the beginning of time.
Early in our friendship, I kind of learned that the reasons I had for enjoying films, games, what have you, were not very well fleshed out, and they didn't facilitate conversation. And so I have made an effort over the years to, not stop myself from enjoying something. I liked, what was that Zack Snyder film that everyone hated?
300?
No, the other one.
Sucker Punch.
Sucker Punch. I liked Sucker Punch, and that was a turn your brain off movie.
Oh, absolutely it was, and I liked it for that reason.
I don't know if I would like it as much today. I'm a different person.
I don't know that it aged well.
Well, I aged and it didn't. I'll put it that way.
The worst thing about Sucker Punch, I keep getting older. It stays the same age.
But I do like to be able to have a conversation, whether that's on the podcast or just with my friends as we're leaving the theater, as we're turning off the Netflix, what have you, and be able to give words that convey meaning and aren't just sort of empty platitudes. I liked this character. That's not bad, but why? And why was that character being cool sufficient enough for me to ignore the rest of the flaws that a film might have had? And it's just, I received a compliment, whether they meant it that way or not recently, that I sound like I do this so effortlessly. And trust me, it's come from years, over a decade of practice at analyzing things that I am enjoying and trying to find both the good and the bad and finding the facts of life therein.
The other reason I do this is because I steal.
Sure.
As a DM, when I'm DMing things in various settings, I steal just rampantly from things I like. One of the ways you do that is you pay attention.
Yeah. A lot of times for me, I might have to watch something twice or three times or be exposed to it in some way before I'm like, oh yeah, that's a cool concept. I'd like to borrow that, because I'm focusing more on, plot and characters and cinematography to a lesser extent, more than you, I think.
Yeah, certainly.
Than I am what is filling in the background of the story.
Now, having said all that preface out of the way,
let me throw one more. We enjoyed this film.
I genuinely did. I think this was fun. I think the character of Nimona was fun. I think the character of Ballister was a good straight man. Ironic, but that is the term. To Nimona's more over-the-top energy. This movie has problems, man.
And in the movie's defense, it did have production problems. This thing took 7, 8, 9 years to make. 8. And went between 3 studios, 4. Had writers and directors replaced. Now, Indy Stevenson went along and worked very closely with the final version. So this is the creator of the webcomic from which this product spawns, you get stamp of approval.
It's clearly an alternate, because it's very... I want to be clear. I've never absorbed the original Tumblr comic this is based on. Boy, howdy, is that an appropriate thing for this to be based on. But the original Tumblr comic is very different to this. I've looked it up. It has only the barest similarity in story. It has mild similarities in character design. It is otherwise just a pretty original story using, similar names and general character archetypes.
If I might be self-indulgent and self-promotional,
of course,
it's a lot like the difference between my first book and Start Again.
No, because Start Again is better than your first book.
But, like, I mean, in terms of how different everything is, like, they're not the same story, but there are
There are
tent
rhymes.
poles. Yeah, there are rhymes. Absolutely. What a great way to put that.
But, so, I'm trying to find a way into this. I think the easiest way to do it is just to say it. The world this story takes place in makes no fucking sense. Now, if you take this movie as a fairy tale, as a fable, that's fine. In fairy tales, the worlds almost never make sense. That's kind of one of their defining characteristics.
Well, and if I may also interject and let the audience know and remind ourselves, this is a film for children.
That's fine. I understand that, but if it's basically this movie is done in by its juxtapositions. Because if they had just leaned into the fantasy element and just did a traditional fantasy kingdom, then the fairy tale nature of the story not really making a whole lot of sense would be fine. It would gel. It would fit thematically with the rest of the piece.
For the sake of you being able to say what you're trying to say, I think we're entering in the spoiler territory of the podcast.
Yes, absolutely. Because they don't do that, and because they have the sci-fi elements in addition to the fantasy elements, and more importantly than the sci-fi elements, the very modern lexicon and charactered behavior. The magic spell of the fairy tale falls apart. And what you're left with is a world that feels close enough to reality that it needs to make sense.
So let's start with one little thing, okay? And I think it ripples outward, much like the stone thrown into the pond. This story takes place in an isolated kingdom. In a fantasy or historical setting, in a fairy tale setting, saying this story takes place in an isolated kingdom doesn't even raise questions. Yeah, there's a big forest in between it and the rest of civilization. Bears will eat you. Nobody goes through it.
They got horses and stuff. They don't really have any fast way of getting places. They're isolated in the deep, dark woods. It's scary out there. They have a big wall, and no one goes over the wall because it's spooky. That's fine. In a fairy tale, in a straight fairy tale, to be clear, wouldn't make any more sense than this, but it's fine. It fits thematically. It tells you implicitly, you're not supposed to worry about this right now. That might become important later.
Well, and there are just fewer questions. Like, okay, how is this kingdom functioning if they don't have trade with the outside? Maybe they're on a river. Done. We move on with our lives.
Yeah, it's not something you need to think. It's not something you need to put energy into. But because of the way the characters act and talk, I think talk is honestly the biggest portion of it. Because they talk like modern people, your brain switches into, well, then this is just people. This isn't supposed to be a very stylized, over-the-top story. These are like human characters. And at least for me, my brain starts to analyze the world they live in to understand their motivations. Because a lot of people's motivations arise from their material conditions. So then you run into the problem of the world making no sense.
And again, to pick a very simple, large aspect of this, the prominent mode of transportation is flying cars. They have drones and cameras and social media.
These things cannot reasonably coexist with a fantasy kingdom that has not looked over their big wall, despite having big laser cannons that point over the edge of the wall and would have been needed to put there by someone in 1,000 years.
And that's literal. There's 1,000 years of history where that's the case.
That's the first of a series of like a Russian nesting doll of the more I look at this, the less it makes sense. And I don't really want to go into a big rant about all of it, but the more I look at the world this story takes place in, the less it makes sense. And the more I look at the big central twist of the movie, the world makes even less sense.
Yeah, and that's a complaint that really takes away from like a lot of the energy of the film. It's it was a little easier to enjoy in the moment because it was a very frenetic movie. They didn't linger too long on anything, and I don't even mean that as a criticism. Some of the freneticness was kind of rough. We've had audio issues with Amazon. We've discussed that before. We don't usually with Netflix. But this movie, when a big fun action scene would kick in, and they would play whatever licensed track they were playing, the characters would all start jabbering incessantly. Sometimes it was very funny. Most of the time, I couldn't hear what was being said because the music was louder than the dialogue. And there was music in the other scenes. Like, this was a choice. This was like you are watching regular TV at regular volume, and then the Girls Gone Wild commercial comes on.
The commercial. God, what a cut.
Ba, 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 da, ba, da, ba, da, ba.
But like
and it took me out of it because I felt less like I was watching a fully realized film, and more like I was watching, politely, schlock made for kids. And honestly, a lot of my complaints about this film are the complaints I have about most children's media. I'm not... When I bitch that I don't want to watch Ashoka, I will eventually. We'll get there someday. I just have a lot of work to do. Because I don't want to watch however many fucking years of a children's cartoon. It's not that media made for children is bad. I loved several children's movies this year. Rise of the Ninja Turtles was great. Like, there's a lot of children's media I like, but I find some common flaws in the storytelling, characterization, pacing, and all kinds of other stuff. Ham-fistedness of getting a message across that just start to grate on me after a while. I love continuity. I'm in the middle of rewatching Roseanne right now, as I think you mentioned in passing. Maybe we were talking about it before the podcast. And one of my favorite things about that show is they will drop something in like season 2 and then follow up on it in season 4. Like, this is something that has happened and occurred and lives in the timeline, and it re-enters continuity. That's nice. It was something that I enjoyed a lot about the earlier seasons of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, back when that was a thing I gave a shit about. They did a lot of fun continuity nods and gags and, stories like that. It was good to see. This didn't keep character lessons learned between scenes. There were so many plot cul-de-sacs that, like, why was an hour of this movie?
And I mean, the short answer is because we need stuff for the wacky protagonist to do.
Well, and I mean, that's the critical part of it, right? Because as far as we were able to ascertain in the 24 hours that have passed since we watched this film, that's not what the webcomic is like.
No, but like...
Graphic novel. It was eventually published. I'm not trying to be...
But this was very much a lot of this movie serves as a vehicle for our wacky Looney Tunes character, who is in this otherwise fairly physically grounded sci-fi fantasy universe, to, like, be freakazoid at things. And, like, so you gotta have a movie for that to happen around.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I just don't... If you're trying to tell a story, that has a fair amount of nuance in it when it feels like it, why do we need to marry these two concepts? Why can't a thing just be a thing? I could speculate.
That's like I said, with mixing the two very sort of diametrically opposed types of story. This movie, it pretty much all its flaws arise from the same source. It's jumbled.
Yeah.
It's trying to be too many different things to too many different people.
Yeah. And, it's one of those things as well. This is something that Indie made back in... I don't feel like looking it up. It was either the aughts or the teens. My Tumblr was around, so...
Yeah.
And now it is a movie some 10 to 20 years later. Like, they're literally a different person now. Like, in all ways. You change. You want to see a different vision of what you wrote come to light. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that, but this is why George Lucas has to stop remaking the Star Wars movies. Because you lose something in every iteration you go through unless you start from scratch. And they did not start from scratch.
Now, we've done a lot of bitching. I'd like to talk some more about all the stuff we liked about this movie.
Not me. Textures were weird.
They were.
They were weird.
They were.
Okay, I'm done now.
They're weird in this screenshot, actually.
They are. Like, this movie, I was really hype about it because of the animation that I saw in the trailer and in some stills. I do not think it looked as good watching it on TV. Now, maybe it would have looked great on a big screen, but I was not given that opportunity. Unless one of you guys wants to sub at the Buy Me a Home Theater tier on Patreon, I don't have that option.
But I've razzed the character of Nimona a little bit. I really like her. She's not the best version of a character type I really love, but she is a version of tiny little gremlin urchin. What steals, which I love. I
enjoy her penchant for chaos. It reminds me of several characters you and I have created over the years who just live to destroy things casually.
Yeah. A very cat energy.
I like her bitey mouth.
Yes, with the sharp teeth.
Yeah, but then she clacks a lot.
Yeah.
That's nice. I would do that.
Yeah, you would. I like the central theme of the movie. I like the fairy tale that's buried in this movie.
Yeah.
I think the movie is done a disservice by
being in itself.
But by not leaning into that fairy tale, by trying to be different other things.
Well, and ironically, by leaning as hard into the fairy tale as they do when they do. Like,
because if they just did one, it'd be fine, but because they're trying to do multiple things, when they do lean into the fairy tale, to the morality play that is this movie is not subtle. Because they're not just a fairy tale, it's trying to be this like quirky modern comedy as well. It comes across with all the grace of a brick to your forehead, and like the message is good. But like if you take a brick and rap "Hi, how are you? I hope you have a good day," and then fucking crack me on the face with it, I'm still not gonna enjoy that experience.
Yeah. We're talking about positives. I overall liked Ballister.
I think the short film with Ballister at the beginning of the movie, before Nimona shows up, is a really good short film.
Yeah, really, really incredible. No, we're saying positive stuff right now.
I liked a lot of this world building.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff in there.
I would fix some of it, personally. But the fixed versions, I'll be stealing some of this.
Yeah. It really, like about a quarter of the way through the movie, I was like, oh, it's Babies vs. Cyberpunk. Took me on a couple of loops after that. But I mean that in a good way. Like, what a great way to get younger people safely into such an interesting genre that has a lot of thought-provoking questions. And honestly, the core, the morality play of this film is the question that's at the root of most cyberpunk fiction. What is human?
Questions of identity and, fit and one's place in the world and that sort of thing.
Who you can and cannot believe. How deep the lies go.
Babies vs. Cyberpunk is a good way of phrasing the other half of this movie.
Yeah. I thought all the acting was pretty good. I don't really have any arguments about anybody's
No, it's good. I mean, yeah, everyone did a great job with the material they were given.
Sometimes,
as I say so often on this podcast.
It got a little hammy, and it kind of took me out of it a little bit, but it was funny enough that I was like, I can't stay mad at you. There's a knight dude who's an idiot. I want to say Thaddeus Sureblade, but I don't remember. He's stupid.
Yeah, he's
too stupid to function.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And yet is somehow one of these highly trusted knights. But
he's such an over the top bully that he comes, he loops back around to just being funny.
Yeah.
Like, he's not an effective bully in the narrative of the movie.
Which I think is a good thing, because he was the character they used at the end, instead of the villain, who was like, had a change of heart and was like, maybe, people aren't so bad, maybe I was wrong. And yeah, you can do that with that guy because he's kind of goofy,
He's
so you
just
like
kind
him.
of dumb.
Yeah.
The villain, however, no. The villain gets theirs.
I will say as well, now you have no frame of reference for this, but another Netflix series that I watched all but the most recent season of, Dragon Prince, there's a character in that show that follows an extremely similar arc to Thaddeus. And it was kind of weird because the animation style is pretty similar to Dragon Prince.
I tried to get into Dragon Prince, couldn't. Watched half of one episode and brain went, no, we're not about this. Turn it off.
The latest season I had a lot of complaints with, but that's not what we're talking about here. Well, the second latest. Again, I haven't watched the most recent one. That was kind of strange, especially being both Netflix original properties. It was just kind of a weird, why are you copying your own homework sort of moment.
I mean, that's already all done.
I guess, yeah. What else to say that's good? I mean, so this is the other problem, right? We covered this at the beginning. Why are we so reflective? Why are we so nitpicky? Why do we take things apart that we love and enjoy? Part of that is we do have a half-hour podcast to fill.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could have been done 20 minutes ago. But that's not great for the show. So if I may, loop back into the negatives.
Sure.
Ballister's the worst cop ever.
I mean, like, he's not as bad as his boyfriend.
No, that's true.
He's the second worst cop. Third, Todd. They're
Right.
all bad.
Yeah, but Ambrosius has at least the benefit of, like, generational blindness.
He's got the privilege that might be
Right.
blinding him.
Yeah.
Whereas
Ballister should know better.
you should know, you're one of us. You're a prole. You
Yeah.
should know better.
He's just terrible at solving crimes and thinking beyond the end of his handsome nose. Like, I cannot tell you how many of the plot cul-de-sacs could have been fixed by him taking another 20 minutes to think about his decisions, which he had. It drove me nuts. I love a good detective story, and when everything happened in the beginning of this movie, I was like, oh, we're going to get a
short
good
film?
mystery. Yeah, the short film.
The good short film that happens at the beginning of this movie?
I was so excited for a pretty good mystery. I didn't think this was going to be a mystery. And then it's not, no, they're very bad at solving it. It's like watching your drunk friend who peaked in high school try to solve a regular episode of Murder, She Wrote. And you're like, the answer is, oh my god, this guy is so clearly evil. Can you just take him at his word? Which I guess Nimona points out constantly about how gullible the guy is. So, that's fair.
Yeah,
I guess
it is
it's
a character trait of his.
characterization.
He's absurdly gullible.
Yeah.
Yes.
I did think it was kind of funny that every time he finally just listened to her, everything went fine. I don't know that that's great writing, but it is very funny.
I have problems with that. It is funny, but the part of the movie that I have criticisms for, that I'm not going to get too deep on, is Nimona as a character basically never fucks up or does anything wrong.
Except for, like, accidents. Like, the whole foundation of this country's religion and
But that wasn't
political
her.
system. She was mad at the time and looked intimidating.
Right, but like, so there's no growth for the character.
No.
The character with the name on the title is not the one who goes through any sort of arc. Like, the only character arc she goes through is she gets real sad at one point, and then someone says sorry, and she's done being sad now.
That's the thing, though, is she doesn't even actually grow from that. As someone with depression, for whatever reason I have it, you're sad all the time, man. It's about fighting through the day, and she has a bad day that her friend helps her fight through. And then dumb shit happens.
So, like, that's fine. Not every protagonist in a movie has to go through some sort of narrative arc. Not every protagonist has to have some sort of, you know, failing or flaw or something they fuck up. That's not required. But when, as you point out, not only that, but all of the advice she gives throughout the whole movie is essentially correct also, it begins to feel like, to avoid loaded terms, the narrative is bending itself around her being right.
Sure.
And that's not the best.
I would maybe think that is a symptom of the problematic development and the runtime of the film not needing to be any fucking longer.
God, no.
Not that it was a long movie. Hour and 45 minutes isn't bad. It's just that they didn't really do anything with that hour and 45 minutes.
You could have cut 15 minutes and hit a tight 90. It's a kid's movie.
Oh, you could have cut half an hour and maybe added some other shit, but regardless. One of the other complaints I have is that Ballister should not have gotten back together with Ambrosius.
No, he deserves way better than Ambrosius.
Ambrosius did nothing but question him and doubt him at every turn and have absolutely zero faith in this man.
Like, Ambrosius is the opposite of ride or die.
Yeah. He's going to flake on you the second things look bad. And, like, I don't think this man needs to be punished for that. You know, he has his redeeming qualities. I just think Ballister could do better.
Yeah, like, everyone's got problems.
Sure.
But, like, Ballister deserves better than this asshole. This asshole who did nothing but not believe you and flake on you and try and convince you to abandon your friends and never listen to you the whole movie, and you end up with him? I mean, I guess you're in a walled city that seems very rigid and, like, not friendly, so you probably don't have a huge dating pool. But, come on, man. There's a big hole in the wall. Go out and see the world. There's probably someone better.
Probably. There's two things I can't go by without mentioning. We've hit our time limit, thankfully. It drives me nuts. It drives me nuts. It got galvanized when you brought up the fact that, you know, the wall and all that stuff is so flawed within the setting.
I have a 40-minute rant of just that wall that we're not doing.
No. But I have to say this part because it is the stupidest thing. The entire crux of the movie hinges around the fact that, like, so many things web off from this one fact that the city is walled to protect from monsters that live beyond the city walls, and has been so for approximately 1,000 years. And they have never seen a monster. No one on the walls has fought a monster. They've never had to use their big scary guns. There's never been a monster invasion. In fact, after 1,000 years, they're only just finally testing their "we should warn the populace about the monsters" button. And for that entire 1,000 years, everyone was just like, yeah, I'm pretty sure there's monsters out there. Top to bottom, left to right, all of them were just believed it.
It is an entire populace of a city's worth of people for 1,000 years, generations of people, show just an utter and complete lack of human curiosity.
And it's not even like they're tricking them.
No.
It's not like there are fake monster attacks that happen. There's literally nothing.
No. The higher-ups, the bad guys, are bad guys in this movie because they believe that there are monsters. So no one, it's not a conspiracy. There has just been 1,000 years of an entire population of an entire city, a big city, that have no human curiosity. They aren't people. They don't act like people. They don't behave like people. People don't do that. People don't... You can barely get people to shelter in place when there's actually a problem. This would not have happened. It wouldn't have.
Drove me nuts.
And that's the combination of fairy tale and Baby's First Cyberpunk not meshing together.
Right. That was the serious, important one. You want the stupid one now? You guys ready for that one? So there's a commercial for a cereal that there's a big, important fight scene about. And it plays the theme from the Banana Splits. You may remember them from our recent Horror Movie Icons podcast for some reason. I watched reruns of the Banana Splits when I was a kid. I liked them a lot. It was just the monkeys, but with guys in mascot costumes. Bumpering cartoons instead of monkey skits. But, yeah, so it played the theme from that, and it was a very iconic theme. It hit the pop charts, being the theme from the Banana Splits. And I felt like I was taking crazy pills, because why, of all things, would you insert the theme from the Banana Splits into this thing? Turns out it was a reference to our main actor, Chloe Grace Moretz. When she was Hit Girl, they played the Banana Splits theme during her big fight scene. I don't know why, but they did.
That was probably as a joke.
Sure, or ironic reference, or it made sense in the movie. I don't know. I haven't seen Kick-Ass. But man, until about an hour after the film, after we were done bitching about all the lore stuff, and I got to get on the Google and find out that it was just a really weird reference to make, it sucked me right out of the film, and I was like, this is more important than the mystery in the movie. Why would you do this? It's fascinating.